The Enneagram is a tool because it highlights the worst parts about us and the best parts about us. And it gives me something to strive for, and it gives me the ability to accept grace. Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Therapy. I'm so excited you're here, and I have an awesome book for you today. Before we get to that, I just wanted to let you know that my audiobook for Nothing Wasted is available online, and it might be available through your local library. It is available on Hoopla, which is an app that many libraries use. But if you go to your local library and show them the title, Nothing Wasted, Struggling Well Through Difficult Seasons by Kim Patton, they should be able to look it up in their system and let you know how you can get it through the apps that they provide. So hopefully this makes the audiobook accessible to a whole lot of people. So share it with your friends. All right, let's get to the show. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about The Story of You, an Enneagram Journey to Becoming Your True Self by Ian Morgan Cron. You may know Ian Morgan Cron from his other books. He wrote The Road Back to You, and then also a memoir called Jesus, My Father, the CIA, and Me. I read his memoir. It was super interesting, but he's more well known for his Enneagram teaching. He wrote The Road Back to You, and that's kind of an in-depth look into the Enneagram and how it affects our lives. And that's where I was introduced to him. And so I have to start this episode with a disclaimer. The Enneagram is a tool. It's a way to figure out the way God made us as individuals, and it breaks us up into 9 categories. If you are one of those people who don't like to be pigeonholed or put in a box or categorized or described as one thing, that lumps you with a bunch of other people that you don't know, if that's you, I totally understand. My disclaimer is that I am not an Enneagram professional, and I know what it's like to be told you're something, if that makes any sense. So while today's episode will be very informational, we're not going to cover all 9 numbers, and we're not really even going to talk about the Enneagram in any very specific and detailed way. There are so many resources about studying the Enneagram, so if that's what you want to do, go for it. I've been learning about it for years, and to me, it's just a fascinating and interesting tool, but I am by no means an expert. So the goal of this podcast today is just to find out a little bit more about ourselves and those we love and how we can take care of ourselves and the people around us. The thing I love about Ian Morgan Cron is that he does not shy away from his weaknesses. He has a past. He has difficulty talking about his past because it causes him a lot of pain, namely his relationship with his father and also his relationship with alcohol. In this book, he talks about his story, but he also just is very relatable and vulnerable, and he doesn't shy away from saying, hey, I'm right there with you. We all make mistakes. We are depraved human beings, and we make choices that aren't the best all the time. And I'm right there with you guys. So he's a very humble author, and he doesn't set himself up as better than anybody. And I really appreciate that stance as he goes throughout the book. We're going to talk today about 3 of the numbers. Like I said, the Enneagram has 9 numbers. In the beginning, he talks about how we have our old story. We have our origin story. This is the truth that we have grown up with in our childhood. This might be a phrase or phrases that we have said to ourselves over and over, and it's something that we believe about who we are. He would like to take us from that old origin story into a new story. And he has this Latin phrase that I'm not even sure how to pronounce, but it's agere contra, and it means acting against. His premise is that we have to go against what comes natural to us in order to create this new story. And every Enneagram number, numbers 1 through 9, they all have a passion and they all have a virtue. And so the goal of knowing yourself through the Enneagram is to move from passion to virtue. Our passion is going to be our temptation, our bent towards fulfilling selfish desires. And what he wants us to see is that we are capable of virtue. And each Enneagram number has a virtue that they can use, that they can grow towards. And so that's the goal. Not that we're all going to get there or that we're going to be perfect, because we all know that's not possible. But the goal is to see ourselves in a new light, to write a new story for ourselves, and to step away from that origin story that has been harmful to us. So the way he does that is through an acronym, SOAR, S-O-A-R, see, own, awaken, rewrite. We see our story, we see where we've come from, we own it, we don't run away from it. It awakens something new in us, and then to rewrite our new story. The first number we're going to talk about is number 9. Number 9s are typically stuffing their own feelings and desires down, and so they are kind of not wanting to rock the boat. They become a little bit invisible. They want to have peace. They want to have a peaceful environment. These are some of the beliefs that 9s get trapped in their old story. He says on page 55, what I want doesn't really matter. Attention from others is okay as long as it's not focused on me for far too long. Everything is okay if there's no conflict. I'm a nice person who doesn't get angry. I need to make people happy even if it means sacrificing my own priorities. 9s are low maintenance. They don't make waves, and they can't always acknowledge their own perspectives. Sometimes they kind of go with what everybody else is doing. So one thing that's hard for them is to wake up to their own feelings, their own grief, and their own anger. It's important for 9s to feel what they feel and not just what everybody else either wants them to feel or what everybody else is feeling. One thing I find really interesting about the 9s is that they tend to fall asleep to life. They can really easily just go along with the flow and not really engage. On page 63, the author says that 9s realize the old story doesn't hold true because their opinions and preferences do matter to those around them. Their friends, family, and coworkers will not reject them or shift into combat when they voice their decisions or express anger. And even when others disagree or a conflict develops, awakened 9s realize that it's okay. While it may never feel entirely comfortable for them, they accept conflict as an unavoidable part of life for everyone. So part of the 9s waking up is learning that they can disagree with others and they can hold a strong opinion and it's going to be okay. And that the people that love them want them to express their opinions. They want these 9s to wake up to the world and be an individual. They don't just want them to go with the flow. One part I really like is on page 66 when the author talked to Anne Bogle, who's one of my favorite literary people in the world. She hosts a podcast and she reads 1 million books a year, puts out a summer reading guide, and she's kind of a go-to person when it comes to finding the right book that you want to read. I love Anne Bogle, and he interviewed her, and she's a 9. And she shared how her therapist once challenged her to respond to herself just as she would treat a teenager emerging from similar life events. The therapist asked, "Do you know any 16-year-old girls? Imagine this happening to them." "Oh, those poor babies," Anne said, suddenly shocked by the possibility of accepting and comforting herself the same as she would for a daughter, a niece, or a friend. Anne described how she wouldn't hesitate to counsel, mentor, and embrace others in need, but always struggled to show similar kindness to herself. Some nines find it helpful to imagine doing that just before acknowledging that they deserve the same compassion. So moving out of this old story of I don't need anything, I'm good, I just go with the flow, nobody really cares what I think or feel, so I'm just going to keep it to myself. Anne Bogle is an example of how we can have that same compassion for ourselves that we have for other people. The second number we're going to talk about is number 2. And this number is so fascinating to me because I think I know a lot of people who have these tendencies. The 2's old story is I'm going to help everybody else and I'm not going to take care of myself, but I'm going to wait for somebody to take care of me because I deserve it because I've been helping everybody else. It's kind of like this, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do everything for everybody, and then when it comes my turn to need help, everybody's going to do it all for me because they know that I've done it for them. Well, that's a story that doesn't always come true. And then when people don't take care of them in turn, they get really bitter and really upset and really manipulative because they have done all these things for all these different people, expecting those same people to do it for them. I love on page 88, there's this story where this guy was watching a movie and it was almost to his favorite part. And I guess it wasn't in the time of life where you can pause it. I'm not sure why he didn't pause the movie. Maybe it was on TV and maybe his remote was broken and he couldn't pause it. But he couldn't get the movie on demand. He was watching it on TV and someone called right before his favorite part. It says, of course I answered it because it's very responsible and helpful to answer the phone. So he picked up the phone because that's the kind of thing that helpers do. It was a perfectly ordinary call, not an emergency, just a friend checking in. So it would have been fine for him to say, hey, can I call you back in half an hour? I'm doing something right now. But he didn't do that. He stayed on the line. He was polite and helpful. But he says, internally, I raged. I was just mad at this person and they didn't do anything wrong. I relate to this because we want to be on the outward appearance helpful and kind and polite. But we forget that we can advocate for ourselves and just say something simple like, hey, I'm doing something right now. Can I call you back in like 20 minutes? And that's a perfectly acceptable thing to do. And he would have then been able to finish watching the movie and also be a good friend. This ties in with boundaries, which I'm always tricky about because to me it's just confusing how to have good boundaries. And most people don't love having good boundaries because it requires you to stand up for yourself and say things that are uncomfortable. But this is just a small example of how we can say something that is helpful for us to protect us from getting so inwardly mad at this person who has no idea what's going on. The person he was talking to on the phone had no idea that he was watching a movie and that it was his favorite part and that he was interrupting. I'm sure if he knew that, he might have been totally okay with, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you in a little bit. Or why don't you come by the house later or something like that. There's so many good possibilities that can come out of you being honest and truthful and letting people know the real situation. Like, for instance, if I have a sick kid and someone calls and asks me to do something for them, I could probably say, yeah, sure, I'll do anything. I'll drop everything in my life right now and go help you just because you asked. But it would probably be harmful to me and my family if I committed to something that I really shouldn't have committed to at that day because it was pretty bad timing for my family. If I just communicate, hey, I understand that I could really help you right now and I wish I could, but I have a kid home from school, they're sick, I'm trying to take care of them, and I have something else going on as well, so I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I don't know if I would be the best person to do this for you because it would be probably hard for me to do both, take care of my family and also, help you out. So I wish I could, but I'm sorry, I can't today. That's part of boundaries, and that's part of just good communication and honesty. Our friends value us as people. Your friends value you. You are not insignificant. So when something comes up and you want to be honest, you want to really communicate, but you're scared of what they might think of you, remember that they love you. They are your friend. They are in your life for a reason, and they care about your needs. Take this step, communicate, be honest, be kind, and have faith that that will be rewarded. These are the beliefs that twos struggle with. People like people who are always cheery and who flatter them. People who know me should already know what I need. If I express my needs, others will reject and abandon me. I probably want too much. I should always try to please others, even if I make myself miserable in the process. I'm powerful only when I'm giving, not receiving. These are toxic beliefs because it lessens your own needs. So, kind of as an example, he says on page 91, 9s are adapting in order to avoid conflict, and 2s are adjusting their image to make you like them. And with what they give others, 2s automatically expect to have their own unexpressed needs met in return. I like that phrase, unexpressed needs, because 2s may often assume that people know what they need and they are not expressing it. And that makes it really hard for people to help them and encourage them because they're not honestly expressing exactly what they need. They're just assuming that you would know. I think this does happen a lot in marriage, and I'm not sure if it's an Enneagram thing or just a marriage thing or a relationship thing, but I feel like we do often expect our partner to figure out what we need without us saying it. It's uncomfortable to have those conversations, especially if you're talking about things that are very intimate or private. It's not fun to sit down and talk about it, but that's what helps the relationship grow, is when you are able to be specific about what you need and ask specific questions about what the other person needs, because you don't know how your words or your actions are affecting the other person if they're not able to tell you. It's always better to have an honest conversation, as uncomfortable as it is, than to let things slide and just assume like, oh no, we're okay, or I don't want to bring that up, or that's really awkward, I don't really want to talk about that. Be brave, have the hard conversations, because that's where your relationship is going to grow and thrive. Another thing I find interesting is that the numbers 2, 3, and 4 are all in the heart triad, which means they are focused on feelings. It says, while 3s adopt the role of the successful achiever and 4s become special and unique, 2s become the helpers. They cultivate an upbeat, positive persona, eager to lend a hand, bring a bouquet, loan the money, host the event, mourn another's loss, and give more than anyone else. So what 2s have to figure out is how they can serve others while also communicating their needs. Lastly, we're going to talk about number 6. 6s are dealing with the origin story of not feeling safe. They have a fear that something bad is going to happen, and so they're constantly preparing and hedging their lives against disasters. Their biggest struggle is fear. It says on page 165, insecure about their ability to face life's fears alone, 6s create a story in which they need to follow standards established by credible authorities. They value and trust the people entrusted to care for them who do their job well. Careful listeners, they like following leaders who respect them and explain the rules, and more importantly, the reason for the rules. Lacking confidence in their own inner compass, however, they often don't take risks, which is a shame since occasional leaping before looking could potentially provide the self-assurance they so desperately need. 6s are extremely responsible and capable. I remember talking to a 6 once when I lived in Florida, and she said, we're always looking the next step ahead, the next 5 steps ahead. They walk into a situation and someone may come up with an idea or a dream or a plan, and they're automatically thinking, okay, what's that going to affect? How's that going to change this situation, and what could potentially go wrong, and how can we protect against that? So while other numbers in the Enneagram are dreamers and big picture people, 6s are extremely detailed and they know how to protect from the worst case scenario. One interesting conversation the author has with a singer-songwriter, Jill Phillips. She says, "Any terrible thing that happened to me, I didn't see coming. Something happened and I didn't see it coming, and yet God was faithful and I got through despite my weakness and my fear. The accumulation of those experiences has made me a very different person." Their virtue that they're reaching for is going to be courage, bravery, doing things despite being scared. Like I said, they are so capable, but they lack the confidence. He says on page 176, 6s can be our freedom fighters, not running from fear and not reacting against it, instead acknowledging fear with healthy respect while stepping forward to do what needs doing. So we talked about number 9, the peacemakers. We talked about number 2, the helpers, and number 6, the loyalists. Again, these are just 3 numbers of the 9. I love all the numbers. I know people in my life who are each number, and it's been really interesting to learn about the Enneagram and also talk to people about it because it helps. It helps me figure out who I am, who God made me to be, who my husband is, who my kids are, who my family is. We're going to end with this beautiful metaphor of this Japanese art called kintsugi. And what it is that these bowls are broken and then they're put back together with gold in the middle of the cracks. He says on page 196, "Like the damaged tea bowl, all of us are broken. It's okay. It's not our fault. It's the way the world is. But there's good news. Like a kintsugi master, God can mend the fissures in our hearts by filling them with restorative grace. He can make us better than new." This ancient method of kintsugi, it's a Japanese art. It restores damaged ceramics using tree lacquer dusted with fine golden powder. So you're going to see the tea bowl that is broken and has cracks, but the artist has filled them in with gold. And it's almost like it highlights the cracks and the brokenness, and that gold brings beauty to something that was broken and shattered. This metaphor is beautiful because there's no exception. All 9 numbers have struggles. All of them. The Enneagram is a tool because it highlights the worst parts about us and the best parts about us. And it gives me something to strive for, and it gives me the ability to accept grace. That gold in the cracks of the tea bowl or the teacup are my struggles and the grace that I can receive at my very moment of weakness. Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we talked about the story of You, an Enneagram Journey to Becoming Your True Self by Ian Morgan Cron. Once again, he is the author of The Road Back to You, which is an excellent book to start with. If you have no idea what the Enneagram is, I would recommend that book. He also wrote the memoir, Jesus, My Father, the CIA and Me, and Chasing Francis. He hosts the popular podcast Typology, and so he talks about the Enneagram every single day. I mean, this man is a professional. He is so reliable, and he loves talking and interviewing all these people of all these different numbers because he constantly is learning and growing and wanting others to take these insights and apply it to their life. Alrighty, see you next time.